Could I just say that one of the things that I think will be a pressure for corporations is reputational, as we know. And now that we have this common standard and the Ruggie guiding principles, I think civil society groups, human rights groups will be looking at, for example, the sustainability reports of corporations. Have they carried out their due diligence from a human rights point of view, as the Ruggie rules? And I think that's where you'll get not necessarily a naming and shaming kind of reputational, but just, are they actually carrying through on this global governance now in the area of corporate responsibility for human rights? But also companies with long supply chains, have a real problem about trying to enforce standards, because the cheaper the product, the more likely that there are abusive standards, especially labor standards. And I chaired a business leaders initiative on human rights for 6 years, which included companies, large companies, including the Gap, Hewlett-Packard, Coca-Cola, etc., who wanted to learn, they wanted to become comfortable with the human rights standards. And it helped the Gap greatly, because about 3 years ago, there was a small factory in India where there was a sort of sweatshop system, and an NGO went in with a camera and filmed, and then it was discovered that some of their product was sold to the Gap through this long supply chain. And it was all over CNN. I remember waking up one morning and seeing this and thinking, my poor friends in the Gap, I wonder how they'll handle. But they actually handled it very well, because they said, when we adopted our corporate responsibility, we said that we are concerned that it's very hard to police your supply chain. We don't always know who's supplying to us. We didn't know this company was supplying. We've destroyed the products, but we're not writing off the company, because that's local jobs. We're going in there to see if we can help them to satisfy a standard where it would be. And within a week, the problem was over. And afterwards, when we met again in the Business Leaders Initiative on Human Rights, the representatives of the Gap said, we had the confidence because we knew what our responsibility was and we knew how to handle it, and we were right on top of the issue. And I think that's another reason why it's in the interest of corporations to have good practice, as you've described, and to want to be respected as corporate citizens, because that's the way to avoid the pitfalls of reputational damage, which can be very severe, as we know.
I serve as the chairman of the Corporate Sustainability Committee at HSBC. And there are many things that we do. First of all, we lend to people who are advancing sustainability in the world. We have 41,000 customers who are in the business of alternate fuels, sustainability practices, etc. And the total lending is $600 billion to them. And that's 35% of our lending. That's truly remarkable. Similarly, each year, we get our sustainability efforts audited by a well-known accounting company like PwC, using the international standards for sustainability. We measure the carbon footprint every year, and we have a very aggressive target of reducing it by 10%. We have said that we will reduce per capita employee electrical energy consumption by as much as 1 megawatt hour per year. I think these are all wonderful initiatives, and this receives the highest attention of the board. So therefore, I think lots of good things are happening in the world, thanks to efforts by President Robinson and others.
So maybe it's time to ask the room if there are questions. Yeah, there are several questions.
I'm Walter Statler, National Defense University Foundation in Washington. At the beginning of his remarks, our chair, Bruno Lafont, mentioned the millions and billions at the bottom of the pyramid. And I think one of the reasons why they are there is that as small children, they never got the head start from their parent or parents to start the educational process before they actually started school, whatever the length of time really was. And those who did have that encouragement, of course, took that throughout their lives, became much more confident, actually enjoyed, and indeed eventually did well in life. And that was exactly the opposite of those who did not get that advantage. And it seems to me that corporations and business as such could really encourage parents to start the educational process, reading, and indeed starting the process of literacy as well. First amongst their own employees, perhaps, and then going out into the community. So it seems to me that it's not just a win-win situation, but a win-win-win situation, benefiting first and foremost children who start the process very early in life by being more confident, by being able to compete. And I think that's a type of spirit that will last throughout their times. It also benefits, of course, the parent because they themselves, of course, take great pride in helping to educate their own children as well, or others in the community, and the companies who, of course, burnish their reputations that way and get more loyal employees and whatnot. And then, of course, also the communities out there. It seems to me that that ability to read and write, or these days to manipulate electrons on a display, is a human right, and certainly there is a great deal of dignity to that. And I wonder to what degree that type of process is really carried out, and if it is not. And I think that governments have a role in all of this as well, because they can encourage, through incentives, companies to do this type of thing. So I'd very much like to hear if you know of this or what your comments on this type of process might be.
Well, let me talk about what some of the Indian companies, some of the individuals are doing in the area that you talked about. I'll talk about two issues. One, of course, helping children become computer literate, digital literate. That's the first one. Second, of course, helping children learn even before they go to school, and more importantly, in some of the emerging countries, helping children actually go to school. On the first issue of making children computer literate, there have been experiments conducted in India titled A Hole in the Wall. What one of the Indian companies did was they made a hole in the wall and they put a monitor in that hole. And they asked their volunteers to, it was right in the middle of a village, they asked the volunteers to just observe from a distance. The first day, no child went near that keyboard because keyboard was there in the front. Second day, a few children went and they started tapping the keyboard. Very interestingly, these are children who did not know any English, but in a matter of 15 days, they, on their own, without any teaching, they learned how to draw drawings. In fact, some of them learned how to use Microsoft Word, all by themselves, all because of their innovation, all because of their own curiosity. For example, my own company gives free about 6,000 laptops or PCs every year to schools in India. We have done it for about 10 years, so we have distributed out 60,000. And then our volunteers go into villages or in a van, and they hold mobile classes for children, and they encourage them to learn. Now, on the issue of helping children actually attend schools, we have a very famous organization in India called Akshay Patra. One of the things that happens in India is that, on the one hand, we have extraordinary progress we have made in our GDP, in our economic development, all of that. Everybody knows that. But at the same time, there is a part of India which has been left behind. Our Prime Minister keeps talking about inclusive growth, and he wants the remotest child, the poorest child in the remotest part of the country to have access to decent education, decent nutrition, decent health care, and decent shelter. Now, as part of this Akshay Patra program, corporations, my wife and I and many others, we provide funding for making sure that these children have hot, nutritious meal every afternoon. It costs just $22 a year for a child to have this meal, and it's a wonderful meal. And today, last year we fed 1.3 million children. And this is the world's largest NGO program in midday meal scheme. And the importance of providing this midday meal is we have noted that the number of children that attend schools has increased dramatically. So therefore, I think in some way, there are experiments being conducted to make children digitally literate, and as important, to make children attend school so that they become literate.